"Than anything you have said yet," returned the blind man, speaking more familiarly, and laying his hands upon his arm. "Look'ee, I never killed a man myself, for I have never been placed in a position that made it worth my while. Farther, I am not an advocate for killing men, and I don't think I should recommend it, or like it, for it's very hazardous, under any circumstances. But as you had the misfortune to get into this trouble before I made your acquaintance, and as you have been my companion, and have been of use to me for a long time now, I overlook that part of the matter, and am only anxious that you shouldn't die unnecessarily. Now, I do not consider that at present it is at all necessary." "What else is left me," returned the prisoner, "to eat my way through these walls with my teeth?" "Something easier than that," returned his friend. "Promise me that you will talk no more of these fancies of yours, idle, foolish things, quite beneath a man, and I'll tell you what I mean." "Tell me," said the other. "Your worthy lady with the tender conscience, your scrupulous, virtuous, punctilious, but not blindly affectionate wife." "What of her?" "Is now in London." "A curse upon her! Be she where she may." "That's natural enough. If she had taken her annuity as usual, you would not have been here, and we should have been better off. But that's apart from the business. She's in London, scared, as I suppose, and have no doubt, by my representation when I waited upon her, that you were close at hand, which I of course urged only as an inducement to compliance, knowing that she was not pining to see you. She left that place and travelled up to London." "How do you know?" "From my friend the noble captain, the illustrious general, the bladder Mr Tappertit. I learnt from him the last time I saw him, which was yesterday, that your son, who is called Barnaby—" "Not after his father, I suppose." "Death! Does that matter now?" "You are impatient," said the blind man calmly. "That's a good sign, and looks like life. That your son Barnaby had been lured away from her by one of his companions who knew him of old at Chigwell, and that he is now among the rioters." "And what is that to me? If father and son be hanged together, what comfort shall I find in that?" Stay, my friend," returned the blind man, with a cunning look. "You travel fast to journey's ends. Suppose I track my lady out, and say thus much: You want your son, ma'am? Good. I, knowing those who tempt him to remain among them, can restore him to you, ma'am. Good. You must pay a price, ma'am, for his restoration. Good again. The price is small and easy to be paid, dear ma'am, that's best of all." "What mockery is this?" "Very likely she may reply in those words, no mockery at all. I answer, Madam, a person said to be your husband (identity is difficult of proof after the lapse of many years) is in prison. His life in peril. The charge against him murder. Now, ma'am, your husband has been dead a long, long time. The gentleman never can be confounded with him, if you will have the goodness to say a few words on oath as to when he died and how, and that this person, who I am told resembles him in some degree, is no more he than I am. Such testimony will set the question quite at rest. Pledge yourself to me to give it, ma'am, and I will undertake to keep your son, a fine lad, out of harm's way until you have done this trifling service, when he shall be delivered up to you safe and sound. On the other hand, if you decline to do so, I fear he will be betrayed, and handed over to the law, which will assuredly sentence him to suffer death. It is, in fact, a choice between his life and death. If you refuse, he swings. If you comply, the timber is not grown, nor the hemp sown, that shall do him any harm." "There is a gleam of hope in this," cried the prisoner. "A gleam," returned his friend, "a noon blaze, a full and glorious daylight. Hush! I hear the tread of distant feet. Rely on me." "When shall I hear more?" "As soon as I do. I should hope tomorrow. They are coming to say that our time for talk is over. I hear the jingling of the keys. Not another word of this just now, or they may overhear us." As he said these words, the lock was turned, and one of the prison turnkeys appearing at the door, announced that it was time for visitors to leave the jail. "So soon!" said Stagg, meekly. "But it can't be helped. Cheer up, friend. This mistake will soon be set at rest, and then you are a man again. If this charitable gentleman will lead a blind man, who has nothing in return but prayers, to the prison porch, and set him with his face towards the west, he will do a worthy deed. Thank you, good sir, I thank you very kindly." So saying, and pausing for an instant at the door to turn his grinning face towards his friend, he departed. When the officer had seen him to the porch, he returned, and again unlocking and unbarring the door of the cell, set it wide open, informing its inmate that he was at liberty to walk in the adjacent yard, if he thought proper, for an hour. The prisoner answered with a sullen nod, and being left alone again, sat brooding over what he had heard, and pondering upon the hopes the recent conversation had awakened, gazing abstractedly the while he did so on the light without, and watching the shadows thrown by one wall on another, and on the stone-paved ground. It was a dull, square yard, made cold and gloomy by high walls, and seeming to chill the very sunlight. The stone, so bare and rough and obdurate, filled even him with longing thoughts of meadow land and trees, and with a burning wish to be at liberty. As he looked, he rose, and leaning against the doorpost, gazed up at the bright blue sky, smiling even on that dreary home of crime. He seemed for a moment to remember lying on his back in some sweet-scented place, and gazing at it through moving branches long ago. His attention was suddenly attracted by a clanking sound. He knew what it was, for he had startled himself by making the same noise in walking to the door. Presently a voice began to sing, and he saw the shadow of a figure on the pavement. It stopped, was silent all at once, as though the person for a moment had forgotten where he was, but soon remembered, and so, with the same clanking noise, the shadow disappeared. He walked out into the court and paced it to and fro, startling the echoes as he went with the harsh jangling of his fetters. There was a door near his, which, like his, stood ajar. He had not taken half a dozen turns up and down the yard, when, standing still to observe this door, he heard the clanking sound again. A face looked out of the grated window. He saw it very dimly, for the cell was dark and the bars were heavy, and directly afterwards a man appeared and came towards him. For the sense of loneliness he had, he might have been in jail a year. Made eager by the hope of companionship, he quickened his pace, and hastened to meet the man half-way. What was this? His son? They stood face to face, staring at each other. He, shrinking and cowed, despite himself; Barnaby struggling with his imperfect memory, and wondering where he had seen that face before. He was not uncertain long, for suddenly he laid hands upon him, and striving to bear him to the ground, cried, "Ah, I know you! You are the robber!" He said nothing in reply at first, but held down his head and struggled with him silently. Finding the younger man too strong for him, he raised his face, looked close into his eyes, and said, "I am your father." God knows what magic the name had for his ears, but Barnaby released his hold, fell back, and looked at him aghast. Suddenly he sprung towards him, put his arms about his neck, and pressed his head against his cheek. Yes, he was sure he was. But where had he been so long, and why had he left his mother by herself, or worse than by herself, with her poor foolish boy? And had she really been as happy as they said? And where was she? Was she near there? She was not happy now, and he in jail. Ah, no. Not a word was said in answer, but Grip croaked loudly and hopped about them, round and round, as if enclosing them in a magic circle, and invoking all the powers of mischief. End of chapter 62.